From eating unsafe fruit to unclean water at the president's mansion to being shot in broad daylight, the story of how America's presidents left this world is stranger than fiction. Some delivered powerful final messages,
Save the country.
and others used their last breath to comment on food. But let's begin at the beginning. George Washington, the first U.S. president, fell seriously ill after riding through icy winter weather. He developed a dangerous throat inflammation, likely epiglottitis, which today would be treated quickly with antibiotics. But in the late 1700s, doctors relied on bloodletting, draining massive amounts of blood in hopes of balancing the body. Washington reportedly lost nearly 80 ounces, roughly the liquid inside 6 energy drink cans. Weak and struggling to breathe, he reportedly told his doctor, "I die hard, but I fear not to go," and later whispered his final words.
"'Tis well."
But Washington's dramatic exit is nothing compared to one of the strangest coincidences in world history. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, the second and third presidents, died on the exact same day. Once allies in the fight for independence, later rivals in politics, and eventually close pen pals again, the two men shared a bond deeper than their arguments. Jefferson, weakened by multiple illnesses, asked the night before his passing, "Is it the 4th?" wanting to know if Independence Day had arrived. He held on until July 4th, 1826, exactly 50 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and quietly said,
"No doctor. Nothing more."
Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Adams, unaware that Jefferson had already passed, lay dying in Massachusetts. His final words,
"Thomas survives."
a poetic twist of fate, considering Jefferson had already slipped away hours earlier. Almost joining this eerie July 4th club was James Madison, the nation's 4th president. Suffering from heart failure, his family hoped to keep him alive until Independence Day. But he refused more stimulants, telling his niece gently,
"Nothing more. I always speak better lying down."
James Monroe, the 5th president, did make it. He became the 3rd president in a row to die on July 4th. Fighting heart problems and tuberculosis, he spent his last moments thinking of his friend Madison. "I regret that I leave this world without beholding him again." And while many presidents died quietly at home, John Quincy Adams, the 6th president, collapsed dramatically on the floor of Congress.
Are you all right?
Ever the public servant, he returned to government after leaving the presidency.
He has no pulse. We must get him help.
Colleagues carried him away, he murmured. "This is the last of Earth. I am content." But things were about to get even stranger, because the next set of presidents faced illnesses, accidents, and bizarre deaths that sound almost unbelievable. Ready? Let's continue. After John Quincy Adams collapsed on the House floor, the nation saw a shift from peaceful passings to a mix of illness, scandal, and tragedy. The 7th president, a man known for intensity and conflict, shocked everyone with how gently he left the world. Famous for duels, battles, and surviving an assassination attempt, he had a reputation tougher than steel. But as age brought tuberculosis, heart issues, and severe swelling from dropsy, the fierce warrior turned unexpectedly tender. Surrounded by loved ones, he comforted them with soft words about meeting again in heaven.
"We shall all meet in heaven."
His successor, the 8th president, lived a calmer life, but struggled with lifelong asthma and heart problems. He passed away quietly at an estate he affectionately named for himself. As he lay fading, he whispered a simple, humble line, expressing his trust in a higher power.
It was a peaceful departure.
Then came the president whose life was cut shorter than any other, a leader who served only 31 days. Determined to appear strong, he delivered a marathon inauguration speech in freezing weather without a coat or hat. Many believed for years that this caused a fatal pneumonia. But modern research suggests he may have instead fallen victim to contaminated drinking water at the presidential residence. A brutal reminder that germs don't care about status. Regardless of the cause, his sudden death thrust his vice president into the spotlight far earlier than expected. That vice president, however, didn't enjoy a celebrated legacy. He took a controversial stance during a divided era, choosing a side that many Americans opposed. When he eventually suffered dizzy spells and a fatal stroke years later, the country's response was subdued. But if tragic timing defines one presidency, it belongs to the next leader, who died just months after leaving office. After traveling through the South, he contracted a deadly intestinal infection known for causing violent symptoms. Despite the pain, his final words were unexpectedly romantic, a heartfelt declaration to his wife that echoed through history. And then came the president, whose death is still debated today. After attending a 4th of July celebration in blistering heat, he devoured cold milk and raw cherries trying to cool off. Days later, he fell violently ill and died. Some suspected poisoning, others blamed spoiled food. But modern tests hint that it was simply severe gastroenteritis, though many still love the mystery. But believe it or not, the next chapter includes even stranger endings, from dying over a bowl of soup to assassinations that changed America forever. After the cherry incident, the next president stepped in and lasted far longer, but his ending is remembered for one of the oddest final statements in presidential history. After suffering a stroke later in life, he was offered a spoonful of soup. Weak but still conscious, he managed to mutter,
The nourishment is acceptable.
The president after him, however, met a fate far more tragic. Before he even took office, he witnessed the horrific death of his young son in a train accident. The trauma never left him. Overwhelmed with grief, he spiraled into isolation and turned heavily to alcohol. His drinking destroyed his liver, leading to slow organ failure. He died quietly, alone, and without any recorded final words, a heartbreaking contrast to the energy and optimism he once carried. Next came a president who historians often criticize harshly. Leading the nation on the brink of a civil war, he failed to ease the rising tensions. When disease eventually claimed him, some whispered theories about mysterious outbreaks, though most agree it was a natural respiratory illness. His final words were a quiet, almost resigned surrender to fate.
O Lord, God Almighty, as God wilt.
But then America witnessed a transformational moment, the assassination of a towering leader whose legacy still echoes across the world. While enjoying an evening at the theater, he was shot without warning. His final spoken words weren't grand or prophetic. Instead, they were gentle reassurance to his wife, telling her not to worry about what others might think as they held hands. His vice president, thrust into leadership during national mourning, carried the weight of that moment for years. Later in life, he suffered 2 strokes, the second so severe it left half his body paralyzed. Even then, he tried to remain defiant, insisting he didn't need medical help, but determination couldn't save him, and those became his final recorded words.
My right side is paralyzed, but I don't need any doctor.
The next president, a celebrated war hero, had an ending as dramatic as his life. After being swindled out of his life savings, he developed severe throat cancer from years of heavy cigar use. Determined to leave something behind for his family, he wrote his memoirs while barely able to swallow. In his last moments, he whispered a single word: water, a simple request from a man who once commanded armies.
Water.
But the story isn't slowing down, because the next presidents faced botched surgeries, more assassinations, and one of the strangest medical tragedies in U.S. history. After the passing of the president who whispered water, attention turned to a leader known for his honesty, humility, and calm demeanor. He lived a long, steady life, eventually passing from heart failure. His final words expressed a quiet longing to reunite with his wife.
I know that I'm going where Lucy is.
The next president didn't die peacefully at all. After only about 100 days in office, he was walking through a bustling train station when a mentally unstable man stepped forward and fired 2 shots. The first barely grazed him, but the second lodged deep in his body. Surprisingly, the wound itself wasn't immediately fatal. But the doctors trying to save him made things far worse. They probed the wound with unsterilized tools, causing massive infections. For 80 agonizing days, he fought for life until the infections overwhelmed him. His final words pleaded for relief from the pain, a heartbreaking example of medical tragedy.
Can you stop the pain?
Following him came a president who battled severe kidney disease. His body weakened slowly, and though stories differ, some claim his final whispered statement reflected hopelessness.
Life is not worth living.
But then came one of the most astonishing presidential stories ever. A man who was larger than life, both physically and in personality. Tough, energetic, and adventurous, he was the kind of person who refused to back down. And in 1912, while campaigning as a third-party candidate, he proved it. A would-be assassin shot him in the chest at close range. Instead of collapsing, he examined the wound, decided it wasn't immediately fatal, walked on stage and delivered an 84-minute speech with a bullet still inside his body.
There are those who point to this struggle and say we cannot win. But I say to you, our courage today...
Later, during an expedition in the Amazon rainforest, he nearly died again from infection, fever, and drastic weight loss. The ordeal weakened him permanently, and he eventually passed in his sleep years later. His final request was simply to turn out the light. Soon after came a president remembered more for his size than his politics. Though often joked about, his health issues were real. Years of strain on his heart eventually led to his death. His final words were never recorded, leaving the moment lost to time. Another president, who suffered a major stroke while still in office, spent his final years debilitated. Calling himself a broken machine, he accepted his fate gracefully before passing away at home.
I am a broken piece of machinery.
But the story isn't over, because the final chapter includes corruption, sudden heart attacks, one of the most shocking assassinations of all time, and the rise of presidents who lived to extraordinary ages. The next leader stepped into a spotlight filled with controversy. His administration faced a storm of scandals, and in an effort to rebuild trust, he took off on a countrywide speaking tour. The stress, travel, and political chaos took a toll on his health. During a stop on the West Coast, he suddenly collapsed from a heart attack while resting in his hotel room. His final words were surprisingly calm.
That's good. Go on, read some more.
The man who replaced him, famously quiet in personality, lived only a few years after leaving office. One morning, he greeted a worker in his home with a simple, "Good morning." A few hours later, he collapsed from a heart attack, and those everyday words turned out to be his last. Next came a president who served during one of the hardest economic crises in American history. Surprisingly, he lived an extraordinarily long life afterward, well into his 90s, before eventually passing away from internal bleeding. He was so frail that no final words were ever recorded. Then came a giant of American history, a four-term president whose leadership carried the nation through the Great Depression and World War II. But behind the scenes, his health was unraveling. Years of stress, high blood pressure, and heart disease wore him down. While posing for a portrait at a retreat in the South, he suddenly said he felt a terrible pain in his head and collapsed moments later.
I felt a terrible pain in my head.
His successor lived many more decades, but during his final days in the hospital, he slipped into a coma with no recorded last words. The man after him delivered one of the bluntest final statements ever. "I want to go. God take me." It was a direct and honest reflection of someone exhausted after years of heart problems.
I want to go. God, take me.
But the next chapter in presidential history shook the world. A young, charismatic leader was riding through a city in an open motorcade when a sniper's bullet struck him. The nation watched in disbelief as the tragedy unfolded. His last spoken words were cheerful, responding politely to a comment made moments before the attack. The leader who followed him died a decade later from a heart attack at his ranch. Another successor faced scandal, resigned, and much later suffered a fatal stroke that left him unable to speak beyond a desperate call for help.
Help!
As medicine advanced, presidents began living longer. One reached his mid-90s. Another broke the record at 93. Yet another pushed past 94. And one, remarkably, lived to 100 years old, spending his final weeks quietly telling family he was ready to reunite with his wife. In the end, despite the dangers and pressures of the job, modern presidents live longer than ever, a testament to better health care and stronger protection.
In now. If this information helped you learn something important,
then subscribe to the channel, like this video,
and share it with others who value history.